Kamikaze, the final stand of Japan's World War II pilots. In the desperate final phase of World War II, Japan adopted a tactic that stunned and horrified the Allied forces: the kamikaze, or divine wind, attacks. The concept arose partly from Imperial Japan's long-standing emphasis on Bushido, a warrior code celebrating self-sacrifice and unwavering loyalty to the emperor. By 1944, with the Allies advancing relentlessly across the Pacific, Japan's high command faced crippling shortages of fuel, ships, and experienced pilots. Conventional methods no longer seemed sufficient to halt the Allied juggernaut. In this grim context, the kamikaze became a radical solution. A pilot would crash his explosive-laden aircraft directly into enemy vessels, trading his own life for the chance to inflict maximum damage. Initially, these missions shocked Allied sailors, who realized they were confronting not just skilled pilots, but individuals who intended to die in the attack, making them almost impossible to deter. The seeds of the kamikaze approach can be traced to Japan's cultural and military ethos. For decades, propaganda extolled the purity of dying for the emperor, and the war's turning tide only intensified that message. Most historians pinpoint the Battle of Leyte Gulf in late 1944 as the major debut of organized kamikaze strikes. With the US landing in the Philippines, Japan's leadership knew their options were dwindling. A newly formed unit under Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi believed a single plane, carrying a full bomb load, could disable or sink a large ship in one direct collision. While the logic seemed unthinkable to Western sensibilities, where self-preservation was a key component of strategy, many young Japanese cadets found themselves receptive or at least resigned to the idea. Some, steeped in national fervor and sensing the homeland's vulnerability, volunteered to die rather than see Japan invaded. Others felt intense social and peer pressure, making refusal a shameful betrayal. Early kamikaze results were disturbing for Allied forces. A single successful impact could blow gaping holes in a destroyer or severely cripple an escort carrier. Psychological impact was profound. Watchmen on Allied decks had to remain hypervigilant, scanning the skies for a lone plane diving straight at them. Yet despite instances of severe damage, the kamikaze tactic did not reverse Japan's strategic decline. The Allies had overwhelming production capacity, continually deploying new ships and repairing damaged ones. By contrast, every kamikaze sortie cost Japan not only an aircraft but a pilot, whose potential future missions vanished in a single, irreversible act. Though committed in large numbers, thousands of pilots eventually took part. This tactic could at best delay the Allied advance, never decisively halt it. One might imagine kamikaze pilots as fervent zealots, but personal letters and diaries reveal a more complicated picture. Some recruits were in their late teens or early 20s, and while many wrote of loyalty to the emperor, a good number expressed private fears. They worried about leaving family behind or struggled to reconcile their duty with a natural longing to live. The harsh training regime left little room for questioning orders, and the stigma surrounding cowardice was immense. Commanders often invoked historical parallels to the Mongol invasions of the 13th century, when typhoons, referred to as divine winds, famously wrecked enemy fleets. The modern kamikaze pilots, then, were cast as personifying that same protective wind, striking enemy ships at the Empire's darkest hour. As the Allies closed in on Iwo Jima and Okinawa in 1945, kamikaze raids intensified. Okinawa became a brutal proving ground, with hundreds of suicide sorties targeting Allied vessels off the island's coast. While these attacks inflicted heavy casualties and nerve-wracking damage, they also highlighted Japan's dire predicament. The Imperial Navy had been largely neutralized, its major carriers and battleships lost. Fuel reserves were scarce, and anti-submarine defenses on shipping routes were ineffective. All that remained in large supply was the willingness of certain pilots to fling themselves at the enemy. In strategic terms, kamikaze missions exacted a human toll on both sides but could not forestall the inevitable. The Allies, backed by industrial might and superior resources, pressed onward. By the time atomic bombs obliterated Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the kamikaze program stood as a stark indicator of how total war and extreme ideology could push a nation to the brink of collective suicide. The Emperor's surrender announcement in August 1945 abruptly halted further large-scale suicide attacks. Nonetheless, pockets of pilots had readied themselves to launch missions even after the bombs fell, uncertain whether the war was genuinely ending. In Japan's post-war reckoning, the kamikaze phenomenon became a subject of both sorrow and solemn pride. Some families of pilots received official commendations, while others felt their loved ones had been manipulated by a regime that glorified death over practical strategy. Historians and filmmakers revisited the kamikaze legacy many times, wrestling with the moral and psychological complexities behind deliberately sacrificing one's life in battle. For the Allied forces, particularly sailors in the US Navy, memories of kamikaze strikes left deep emotional scars. Many recounted the terror of seeing a plane plummet directly onto a deck, unstoppable despite intense anti-aircraft fire. Survivors described the gruesome scenes after such impacts, with fires, shrapnel, and twisted metal claiming the lives of crewmen. While surface fleets adapted by refining radar picket lines and intensifying defensive fire, no method guaranteed a complete defense. The vulnerability that kamikaze attacks exposed shook even the most battle-hardened servicemen. This element of unpredictability, enemy pilots aiming not to survive but to kill or maim with certainty, left a lingering sense of dread. The kamikaze strategy underscores the lengths to which Japan's wartime leadership was willing to go in their refusal to capitulate. It also, in many ways, underscores a fundamental miscalculation, a belief that spiritual victory could triumph over the Allies' industrial and strategic advantage. While some missions did score hits and instill fear, each success was a one-way ticket for the pilot, draining Japan's potential manpower. That logic, reliant on heroic sacrifice, was increasingly incompatible with modern warfare's systemic demands. As historians argue, kamikaze tactics were less a winning strategy than the embodiment of a cornered nation's ultimate desperation. In the broader context of World War II, kamikaze operations shaped the final narrative of the Pacific Theater. They solidified Allied resolve. Leaders like Admiral Chester Nimitz and General Douglas MacArthur recognized that if Japan's defenders acted similarly in a ground invasion of the home islands, casualties might skyrocket on both sides. Such concerns arguably contributed to the decision to deploy atomic bombs, justified at the time partly by a desire to avert the need for a brutal, drawn-out invasion. Of course, the morality and necessity of both atomic bombings and kamikaze missions remain debated, with critics on each side highlighting the human cost. Yet the kamikaze story reminds us how quickly wartime doctrines can escalate toward self-destructive extremes. Post-war Japan attempted to reconcile kamikaze memories with its pivot to a pacifist constitution. Some veterans and families keep alive the memory of those who gave their lives for the emperor, commemorating him at Yasukuni Shrine. Others view the program as a tragic waste brought on by militaristic fanaticism. Museums and documentaries present varied interpretations. Some emphasize personal sacrifice, while others highlight the manipulation of young minds. In either case, kamikaze missions have become a symbolic reference point in discussions of national identity, the ethics of war, and the limits of human obedience under totalitarian systems. Today, few experiences from World War II as emblematic of sheer desperation as kamikaze attacks. The image of a single-engine plane diving toward a ship at full throttle underscores the lethal blend of individual valor and institutionalized fanaticism. In an era of drone warfare and advanced missiles, the legacy of kamikaze remains a chilling historical marker. It's a testament to what can happen when a nation venerates the ideal of martyrdom above the practicalities of continuing life. The final months of World War II thus serve as a warning against letting ideology overpower reason, a lesson etched in the final stand of Japan's World War II pilots. Subscribe to Legends of the Battlefield for more stories of brilliant tactics and legendary leaders.